Tory MPs from London and the home counties will have a crucial say in tomorrow's vote to put a new Prime Minister into number 10. 1/3 of the 372 come from the Thames television area. What are the issues on their minds? What have their constituents been telling them about the candidates? We've invited MPs from across the party to tell us the answers. They'll be doing more than vote for a new Prime Minister tomorrow. They'll be voting for their own futures as well. That's a Thames Reports special, tonight at 10:50 on ITV.
John Major claims at least 165 votes. Michael Heseltine says he has even more firm pledges. Douglas Hurd says he has a good chance in the third ballot. British hostages tell the ambassador they're very angry. And the desert rats practice blowing up a minefield. Good evening. The three Tory leadership candidates go into tomorrow's second ballot making conflicting claims about their support. Mr. John Major's team said tonight he has some 165 MPs behind him. Mr. Heseltine says he has more. Mr. Hurd says he can still win. Added together, the total is more than the 372 Conservative MPs. To win outright tomorrow, one candidate needs 187 votes. Channel 4's Parliament programme, produced by ITN, has been carrying out a detailed survey of Conservative MPs, and it points to John Major coming close to outright victory tomorrow night. A similar survey of MPs last week accurately predicted that Mrs. Thatcher would be forced to a second ballot. This is what their figures look like at the moment. John Major, more than 160 votes. Michael Heseltine, about 110, much less than his supporters are claiming. Douglas Hurd trailing with between 60 and 70. More than 30 MPs have not made up their minds or aren't telling anyone, and votes are still changing. The Parliament programme will give a final prediction tomorrow at 12 noon on Channel 4. The Transport Secretary, Mr. Parkinson, Mrs. Thatcher's friend and ally, says he's supporting Mr. Major. Mrs. Thatcher has said goodbye to workers at Conservative Party headquarters and told staff at her farewell party in Downing Street tonight that life begins at 65.
These are the people who will pick a new Prime Minister. Tory MPs back at Westminster today. Some of them with their ears well boxed over the weekend by their local parties about Mrs. Thatcher's going. A backlash which did hit Michael Heseltine's campaign, though his people say only temporarily. Today, with each candidate after each and every vote, they've been talking totals. Mr. Heseltine first. He'd heard John Major's people claiming yesterday that they'd got 150 firm pledges.
We have more firm pledges than John Major is claiming at the moment, and that has been the position all the way through. Douglas Hurd has got more votes than people are suggesting, and it's now a question of seeing if we can make a breakthrough to the first, well, to the second ballot and conclude it there, or whether we're going to wait until the third ballot when Douglas Hurd's second preferences, which are very clearly coming our way, will make it decisive.
Note the careful and deliberate lack of hard figures. Mr. Heseltine never gives them, just sticks to the I'm in front claim. But if the intention was to suggest a Heseltine figure of just over 150, that was soon trumped by the Major camp, bursting out of their headquarters to proclaim...
I'd like to give you our latest campaign news. John Major's pledged votes, which come from all parts of the party, have now gone up to the mid-160s, and they're still rising. There is no doubt that John is well on the way to being Britain's next Prime Minister.
But what about the Heseltine claim that the Major figures are wrong?
Wait and see.
But hearing that 160-plus figure, the pro-Heseltine Tory Party Vice Chairman David Trippier immediately upped his man's figure.
We're certainly, we believe it's certainly in excess of 160.
Douglas Hurd's people wanted to concentrate more on policy than on number crunching today, which is why 4 cabinet and 2 junior ministers agreed to a sort of team photograph before Mr. Hurd underlined his concerns about domestic policy issues, health, education, the environment.
There's no contradiction between the standard of living, the prosperity of the individuals and their families, and the quality of life. Standard of living, quality of life, they go together. And I'm determined that sound money sustainable economic growth in the 1990s will be used to transform the quality of life in this country and sustain and develop the great public services.
But their reaction when told of the Heseltine and Major claims of 150 to 160 votes for each? But tonight came word of what the Hurd camp calls a surge of support. The result, they say, of concentrating on policy today, and they claim that it has him nosing ahead of Mr. Heseltine. But in the Major camp, the name of the game is movement, mobility, even if it does put some of the press in mortal danger.
No, it's another bus shelter coming.
No,
watch it, that'll be more public expenditure if you break it.
And they kept the sense of movement going later with an endorsement by one of the last undeclared members of the cabinet.
And you don't suddenly abandon the Prime Minister and switch overnight. My candidate withdrew, and I thought very hard and long, and I talked to people before I came to the conclusion that I did.
Might that not seem as though you're saying, here is, if you like, son of Thatcher, the Thatcher candidate?
No, I think his economic views tally closely with mine, but he's going to be his own man.
The Hurd camp matched that with a senior backbencher who's not too keen on Mr. Major's record.
Well, John Major was associated with, in my opinion, was a disastrous period between 86 and 88, when credit was allowed to expand very much indeed. I don't think he's yet emerged as an independent figure in politics, and I do think that Douglas Hurd is, on the other hand, an older and independent figure.
So where are the new Heseltine recruits? While he says there are some, he decided to speak for himself today. Could he handle a Gulf war?
We all hope that the war will not break out in the Middle East, and I've always admired what Douglas Hurd is doing as Foreign Secretary there. But of course, if there were to be an outcome now of the change of leadership, I would believe that my experience as Defence Secretary is particularly valuable in such a circumstance.
Today, another sign of the transfer of power, at least within the Conservative Party. Mrs. Thatcher went back to Central Office, the party's command headquarters, where her 3 election victories were organised. Today, she went back to say thank you, and today the party workers said goodbye with a cheer. Tonight, there was another farewell party at number 10. Guests reported the Prime Minister as being on very good form. Life begins at 65, she told them. And as others now prepare to take on her exceedingly heavy responsibilities, Mark Thatcher said that his mother was very well indeed. So how do things stand tonight? Well, first, you need to take the various claims and counterclaims about numbers, in some cases, with a sackful of salt. Because if you added all the numbers together, you'd actually come out with 30 or 40 more Tory MPs than actually exist. And there is some evidence that 1 or 2 people who've declared publicly for Mr. Major, that's largely to keep the Tory troops back home happy because they see Mr. Major really as Mrs. Thatcher's natural successor. Those people may still, in fact, vote for Mr. Heseltine or Mr. Hurd. It does look very certain now, though, as though it's going to go to a 3rd ballot on Thursday. Michael Brunson, News at 10, Westminster.